Welcome back to News Talk. While you slept, political reporters like our next guest were pouring through another batch of Hillary Clinton's emails. Those emails were released at 9 p.m. by the State Department. More than 7,000 pages in all, the largest release yet from her time as Secretary of State, offering a view both political and personal. Correspondent Martha Raddatz has details.
Overnight, those 7,000 pages of emails from Clinton's private server released, 125 now deemed classified, including details from a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, now heavily redacted. A Clinton aide aware at the time of the sensitivities, happy to talk secure at your convenience, he writes, but then adding the highlights are as followed. Those details now blanked out. It appears even employees of the State Department's computer help desk were confused by Clinton's use of the private server. They had no idea it was you, just some random address, so they emailed. Her aide, Huma Abedin, replies to Clinton. Many of the other emails more mundane, but providing insight into the person behind the office. Details from her daughter Chelsea about a trip to Haiti. Her excitement over an iPad, asking, do you think you can teach me to use it on the flight to Kiev next week? Disdain for government shutdowns during snow days in the nation's capital. I guess I will work from home again, but think this is silly. Even the need to know when 2 popular television shows air. Can you give me times for 2 TV shows? Parks and Recreation and The Good Wife. So far, only 25% of the emails have been released. The State Department is aiming to have them all out by January 2016.
Joining us now, Josh Gerstein, senior reporter for Politico. Great having you here.
Good to be back, Bruce.
Thanks very much for your time. If you've read all 7,000 pages, you are a speed reader. I doubt anyone has.
Right.
What have you seen? What can you tell us? What stands out?
Well, I mean, the most interesting point, I think, is this question of what was really sensitive in the emails, because that goes to the issue of whether Clinton should have kept this personal account at all. As mentioned in that lead-in report, there are 125 the State Department is now designating as classified, talking about the Middle East peace process, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all kinds of hot spots around the world that they now won't tell us what the conversations were, even though they were carried out on an unclassified system at the time they took place. So that's going to continue to fuel this controversy. I thought from a political point of view, the most interesting messages were Hillary Clinton's continued correspondence with her longtime aide, Sidney Blumenthal, who seemed to be sort of the man about town, picking up political intelligence for her, trying to find out what was going on with talk that David Petraeus might run for president, what was being said at dinner parties, sometimes off the record, somehow making its way to Blumenthal and on to Clinton, and even a bit of palace intrigue with a lot of questions about the Obama White House and whether there might be a shakeup, particularly in the national security structure of the Obama White House, which it sounds like some on the Clinton team were chafing at a bit in those early years.
How much vulnerability is there for current 2016 frontrunner on the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton, in the fact that this arrangement existed?
I mean, I think it continues to be a pretty serious political headache for her. Some of it is a lack of anything else scandal-wise to talk about, not seeing a huge amount of traction on the part of the Republicans with regard to, say, the Benghazi incident, so they have something to talk about. On the other hand, there are groups on both ends of the political spectrum that have objections to her doing business this way on a private server. It did apparently lock most of the emails off, or at least some of them off, from Freedom of Information Act requests when she was in office. It may have interfered with other kind of transparency efforts, and we know that had she not returned them to the State Department, they might not have been archived or could have been lost forever, and she only returned them 23 months after she left office. So I think it continues to be a headache for her, especially the court-ordered monthly releases that are going to bring this story up every single month all the way through the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary next year.
We are efforting, to use a television term of art, we are hoping to talk with former, at some point in the not too distant future, former White House Special Counsel Lanny Davis, a local attorney of note who was in the White House helping President Clinton during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and who, as luck would have it, was a friend of Hillary Clinton at Yale and has been a friend of hers ever since. Why do I say this? Because whatever the best case scenario is for her from a rhetorical / political / legal setting, Lanny will have it. What is, I mean, to the criticism, give us a preview if you can, to the people listening to us now who might say she should have used the right system, the government system, the more secure system. This whole arrangement was bogus. What's the best case pushback?
Well, she initially said this wasn't much of a story at all and it didn't, resonate at all with the public. She's now changed her tune somewhat and said she understands that people have questions about this. She's saying that as she sees her poll numbers come down in some of the key Democratic primary caucus states. Her best argument, I think, is that she's not a very technologically savvy person. She didn't invest a lot of time in thinking about what email address she was using or what server it was. I guarantee you she never touched this server when it was at her house in Chappaqua.
If she couldn't TiVo her favorite programs,
no,
chances are she wasn't.
Do her program. She couldn't operate a fax machine. So it doesn't seem like she's a very savvy person. She has acknowledged that it was not the best choice for her to make. But it continues to be a headache because the rules on classified information, some of them are pretty strict, others are pretty vague, and it probably is the case that it was not a best practice, as they might say, to be sending these kinds of emails, especially about foreign leaders like Benjamin Netanyahu, on unsecured servers. That said, you will find other people in the State Department doing that fairly regularly, especially if you think about the fact if it was classified, it wasn't supposed to be on the regular State Department email system either. So people sending her these emails from the regular State Department system, if somebody was violating, they were also violating by doing that. It's not considered secure enough. And we also know that the State Department email system, the unclassified one at least, has been repeatedly hacked. They had to shut it down for a whole weekend at one point to try to get what they thought were Russian electronic moles or viruses out of the system.
Wow. It's been remarkable to watch Bernie Sanders on the campaign trail. He has consistently drawn huge crowds, and in Iowa, he is closing the gap on the woman still regarded to be the Democratic frontrunner, Hillary Clinton.
He's pushed her under 50% in one of the recent polls that I saw, and he is not raising this email controversy. As far as I know, he hasn't addressed it. Martin O'Malley, the other Democratic candidate of note, has brought it up a few times and said she needs to answer these questions. But at the moment, it seems like Sanders is kind of a recipient of either dissatisfaction or nervousness about Clinton's candidacy, driven in part by this email controversy.
The public doesn't seem super engaged at this point. Folks who didn't like Secretary of State Clinton before, this would mesh with a narrative or a general belief system that they would have had before. Republicans in the main probably don't like this, but they don't like her. I don't get the sense, and I'd be curious to know what your feel is and what the numbers you've maybe had a chance to look at tell you, but this doesn't feel big to me, at least not at this point, in terms of Democrats' independence across the board electorate.
I think it does. I don't think it's huge, but I think it does underscore concerns some people have about Hillary Clinton, about her candor, about this issue of whether she's going to follow the rules that everybody else has to follow. I agree with you, it's not monumental on that side of the equation, but there is a constituency that's traditionally been allied with Democrats that favors transparency, government access, that railed against secrecy during the Bush administration. It's very hard if you're one of those people who railed against those kinds of practices during the Bush administration to say, oh yeah, it's fine to keep all your government-related email on a private server and only turn it in 2 years after the fact. It's just not a very intellectually consistent position to hold.
Interestingly, Bernie Sanders maintains that his popularity, his surge, if we can call it that, is because of the statements, the things, the policies that he's stressed as a candidate. That they're not. This is not a rejection of Clinton or a comment, if you will, on this email bit, and so people are turning to the guy who's simply next in line. he makes the case that this is folks gravitating toward my message, and some of the polling data does bear that out.
Yeah, I think there's an element of actual enthusiasm, if not for him, at least for his message of being more forceful on the question of labor rights, of economic inequality, are trying to make an argument that maybe the Clintons are not the best vehicle to push this economic inequality argument. Clinton has also clearly been trying to combat that by stressing some of those same themes about minimum wage and economic fairness to try to maybe bring over some of those waffling Democrats.
And in just like 10 seconds, are there more Clinton emails, or is this sort of...
Oh, yes, every month, at the end of the month, all the way through January, we're going to get another big batch of these, which is why this story won't go away.
And the 9 o'clock thing, that was just kind of comic, but it is what it is.
Not comic to me, but...
I hear you. Josh Gerstein of Politico. Always great having you here.
Bruce,
Thanks
anytime.
so much. Back with the program now after this.